Well, good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson Tonight. The Trump administration took a big step today toward fulfilling a central campaign promise by endorsing an immigration reform bill crafted by Senators Tom Cotton and David Perdue. The bill would sharply restrict immigration based simply on family reunification and instead give priority to immigrants who have skills, who speak English, who might help the country. It would also cut future legal immigration by 50%, bringing the number closer to historic levels. It would also abolish something called the diversity lottery. Oh, the White House press corps hated it. Polling shows the public liked it. The White House rolled it out today in the briefing room, and there was quite an exchange. Watch this interchange between Stephen Miller, the White House top policy advisor, and Jim Acosta of CNN, who started off by implying this bill somehow, for reasons he didn't quite explain, must be racist. Watch.
This whole notion of, well, they could learn, they have to learn English before they get to the United States. Are we just going to bring in people from Great Britain and Australia?
Jim, actually, I have to honestly say, I am shocked at your statement that you think that only people from Great Britain and Australia would know English. It reveals your cosmopolitan bias to a shocking degree that in your mind, no, this is an amazing moment. This is an amazing moment that you think only people from Great Britain or Australia would speak English is so insulting to millions of hardworking immigrants who do speak English from all over the world. Jim, have you honestly never met an immigrant from another country who speaks English outside of Great Britain and Australia? Is that your personal experience?
Of course there are people who come.
But that's not what you said, and it shows your cosmopolitan bias. And I just want to say,
it sounds like you're trying to engineer the racial and ethnic flow of people into this country.
Jim, that is one of the most outrageous, insulting, ignorant, and foolish things you've ever said.
Ouch. Well, apparently undeterred, Jim Acosta rooted through his bag of cliches and came up with, presto, the old Statue of Liberty trick. What do you think of that, Stephen Miller?
The Statue of Liberty has always been
let me ask you a question.
Of hope to the world for people to send
do you believe,
people to this country, and they're not always going to speak English, Stephen. They're not always going to be highly skilled. They're not always going to be...
Jim, I appreciate your speech. Jim, I appreciate your speech, so let's talk about this.
It was a modest...
Jim, let's talk about this. In 1970, when we let in 300,000 people a year, was that violating or not violating the Statue of Liberty law of the land? Tell me what years meet Jim Acosta's definition of the Statue of Liberty poem, Law of the Land. So you're saying 1 million a year is the Statue of Liberty number. 900,000 violates it, 800,000 violates it.
Well, you won't be surprised to learn that Acosta did not have a specific number in mind. Actually, even a general number to within, say, several hundred thousand. He had no idea at all, none. And yet he kept talking, which turned out to be a mistake.
We've had periods of very large waves, followed by periods of less immigration and more immigration. And during we've had
a period of immigration right now. The president wants to build a wall. You want to bring about a sweeping change to
surely, Jim, you don't actually think that a wall affects green card policy. You couldn't possibly believe that, do you? Actually, the notion that you actually think immigration is at a historic law. The foreign-born population in the United States today, Jim,
staff on Monday talking about how border crossings.
Do you really? I want to be serious, Jim. Do you really at CNN not know the difference between green card policy and illegal immigration?
We can answer that question. No, they don't know the difference. Jim Acosta and the network he works for don't know much at all about this subject. They don't know how many immigrants come here every year or how. They don't have any clue as to how many should come, ideally. They know very little about the economic effect those immigrants have on Americans who already live here because they don't care enough to find out. They're utterly ignorant on the subject of immigration, and yet, and here's the amazing part, they are still filled with absolute moral certainty and boundless self-righteousness. They are buffoons, in other words, the drunk guy at the party with bad breath who won't stop talking. Wow, is that embarrassing. Joining us now, a noted connoisseur of awkward moments, author and columnist Mark Steyn. Did you see this exchange today, Mark?
Yes, I did. And first of all, I don't understand why Jim Acosta is allowed to hijack a White House press conference for this kind of showboating. You know, one of the reasons why we need immigrants to come here and do the jobs that Americans won't do is because apparently one of the jobs that Americans won't do is drag Jim Acosta out of there, kick him to the sidewalk and say, if you want to do the Jim Acosta show, there's a rusting boxcar around the back of the freight yards with 3 semi-comatose hobos who are interested in it, but nobody else here is. And that would have been the healthy reaction to that. As for the range of cliches he brought up, the French gave the Americans a pretty good Statue of Liberty, and then the Americans hammered a lousy poem by Emma Lazarus onto it and turned a pretty great Statue of Liberty into a statue of immigration. I regret that, but the fact is that Stephen Miller was quite right at this point about, do you only want Englishmen and Australians? There are 60 countries in the world, including mine, that have English as an official language. For example, just a few years ago, after the genocide, Rwanda, a Belgian colony, joined the British Commonwealth, and as part of it, even though it's never been a British colony, and as part of that, they stopped teaching French in schools and began teaching English. So you can have Rwandans who are fluent in English. You can have Papua New Guineans who are fluent in English. You can have Tuvaluans who are fluent in English, and Singaporeans who are fluent in English. And the idea that this is just some pasty white man's language is so deranged. Almost a third of the members of the United Nations are proficient in English, more or less.
Jim Acosta thinks English is a race.
Yes.
Which is troubling.
Yes, he does. Oh, by the way, Tucker, there's plenty of people in the United Kingdom who speak Welsh and Gaelic. I was driving through the Highlands, Scottish Highlands, with my daughter, and we heard the BBC's Gaelic rap station in which these delinquent Scotsmen are rapping in Gaelic. So I protest on behalf of the non-English speakers of the British Isles of this outrageous racism from this Acosta buffoon.
I don't know if I can improve on that. I do think, though, on some level, liberals, Jim Acosta, the network he works for, all of Washington, are offended by the idea that America would craft an immigration policy that helps America. Why is that so offensive to them?
Yes, basically until half a century ago, it was thought perfectly normal for countries to decide the immigrants that were of most use to them, which tended to be the immigrants who could assimilate the easiest. And suddenly it's become a point where there's 7 billion people on the planet, and you're not allowed to make value judgments about any of them. And in the case of the United States, we have wound up with the most extreme immigration policy of all, where we actually advantage unskilled illegal immigrants who don't even have the couple of $100 for the paperwork. I mean, don't forget, what Jim Acosta is complaining about is that Trump wants to move to a Canadian-style immigration policy. These are the same people who are wetting their knickers over Justin Trudeau on the cover of Rolling Stone saying, oh, why can't we have a dreamboat president like the Canadian Prime Minister? And Trump saying, well, I'll meet you halfway. Let's start with Canadian immigration policy. And suddenly Justin Trudeau is this white supremacist, and Trump is trashing America's immigration policy to turn himself into another maple-infused Ku Klux Klan moose hunting ground like Canada. This is ridiculous.
The best thing about this debate, though, is you really do get to learn how much the ruling class hates itself and hates this country. This will continue. Right. Mark, thank you for you just put that all in perspective, as usual.
Thanks a lot, Tucker.
President Trump delivered a strong praise today for the new immigration bill, while flanked by its authors, Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas and Senator David Perdue of Georgia.
The RAISE Act ends chain migration and replaces our low-skilled system with a new points-based system for receiving a green card. This competitive application process will favor applicants who can speak English, financially support themselves and their families, and demonstrate skills that will contribute to our economy.
Senators Cotton and Perdue join us now. Thanks to you both. Senator Perdue, to you first. When you hear that, those sound like the precepts, the principles behind it sound non-controversial. They sound pretty basic. You guys work in politics. I know you've polled this. What's the public opinion of those ideas?
Well, this is the big learning here in Washington. The people out there in the rest of the country get this. 72% believe it should be the primary worker plus their nuclear family or less. 18% believe it ought to be just the nuclear or just the worker. So people out there in the real world get this. It's pro-worker, it's pro-growth, and it's been proven to work in Canada and Australia.
What's interesting, Senator Cotton, when you say this bill is pro-worker, our current arrangement seems anti-worker. If you look at the effect on wages, working class people in the country since 1965 when the Kennedy Act became law, they've gone down or remained stagnant. Do you think there's a direct connection between mass immigration and low wages?
No doubt, Tucker. I mean, the law of supply and demand applies to the labor market just like it does every other market.
Oh, it hasn't been repealed for the purpose of immigration?
Even though some Republicans feel like it doesn't apply there. Look, over the last 40 years, my lifetime, you've seen a quadrupling of the number of foreign-born residents in our country. The vast majority of those, 14 out of 15 today, come here not based on their skills or their education or their English language ability, on some other category. They're by definition unskilled and low skilled. In that 40-year window, if you have a high school degree or less, your wages have fallen. If you have more than that, so if you're not competing with those very same immigrants, your wages have increased. So there's a direct correlation between the mass unskilled, low-skilled migration we've seen over the last few decades and stagnant wages and standards of living for working Americans.
Wouldn't it be clarifying to import, I don't know, lobbyists, for example, from abroad who would work for less than our lobbyists? Maybe that, or United States senators. Do you think that might change some minds?
Lobbyists, lawyers, there's no end of this that you could import people to compete directly against people in Washington, D.C., and they might sing a different tune. But there's just simply no doubt that people who come here who are unskilled and low-skilled have a direct impact on the wages of Americans, whether their ancestors came over on the Mayflower or whether they just took the oath of citizenship, who are competing for those very same jobs.
So, Senator Perdue, about 60 million, the estimate is, Americans speak a language other than English at home. That's a dramatic increase over the past 50 years, and it's getting bigger every year. And it's bad, obviously. It divides the country. Do you think your bill would do something to change that?
Well, first of all, there are several categories that we use in a merit-based system. This is what the president talked about in his campaign. It's one of the reasons, quite frankly, I think he got elected, and I give him high marks for making this a priority in this new administration. But when you look at the categories in here, somebody could come in here and be a PhD with no English skills, still qualify potentially.
Right.
So this is not about English speaking only. This is about a diverse group of people to come in and help grow our
So
economy.
what are the criteria?
Well, first you got education, you got a job, you got if you've been contributory in terms of accomplishment, if you want to start a business or something like that, English is one, and then compensation.
Yeah. So if you want to invest a lot of money in here. So who are the forces arrayed against this?
Well, a lot of people, once they learn about the bill, are actually pretty pleased with it. Again, this only focuses on green cards. The million green card recipients every year. It doesn't focus on temporary visas, which can be controversial, or anything else. And I would say that it's better to make a citizen out of someone who comes here rather than just use them as a temporary laborer.
Where's the Chamber of Commerce on this?
I think a lot of them are going to be very supportive of it. Again, like if you're sitting in Silicon Valley and you depend on H-1B visas, wouldn't you rather have someone who's going to be a citizen of the United States and stay here forever, rather than have to have that
then
visa renewed in 3 years and go back,
exactly.
so you can invest in them. So the business community will be supportive, I think.
Are you all going to make this case publicly? Are you going to force the opponents of this bill to explain why they're against it?
We saw it today. We started the debate today. And we're going to continue that. I mean, this is something, though, I can't understand why anybody who wants a pro-growth effort in America to oppose this. I mean, today, the system is so broken that only 1 out of every 15 who come in America come in with a skill. This is a broken system, and it penalizes people who've been here and who just got here.
Senator Cotton, can you give us, I know it's very early today, but what's the timeline for this?
Well, this immigration obviously a complicated and controversial topic, but David and I are committed for the long haul to making this bill a reality. Again, the president campaigned on immigration as the single distinctive issue that separated it not just from Hillary Clinton, but from 16 other Republicans.
That's exactly right.
And the American people expect him to deliver on that. This is one piece of the immigration puzzle. I think as more senators and congressmen learn about it, as they see what it would do for our working citizens out across the country, what it would do for economic growth as a whole, I'm hopeful that we can get consensus, even if there's still a lot of other things that divide us on the immigration issue.
I think that's right. You always are welcome here to explain how it's going because we're interested. Our viewers are.
We'll be back.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Well, not every Republican senator is so eager to fix our broken immigration system. President Trump has been in office 6 months. He's still waiting for a lot of lesser government appointees to be confirmed by the Senate. Some of them are being held up by Democrats. One is being held up by a member of his own party, Lee Francis Cisna, the president's pick to head the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Service. It's a major Homeland Security agency that plays a big role in implementing immigration policies. The system was nominated months ago, easily should be confirmed. The vote was delayed, not by a liberal, instead by Republican Senator Tom Tillis of North Carolina, who placed a hold on the nomination to keep it from being voted on. Why? Why is he holding CISNA hostage? He wants the Trump administration to break a campaign promise and agree to grant more H-2B visas. That program allows companies to import foreign workers for temporary gigs in blue-collar fields like landscaping, tourism, construction, the sort of jobs poorer Americans could greatly benefit from. The program is intended to fix labor shortages, but in practice, it is easily abused, and it is abused, with employers using it to displace American workers and pay lower wages. Tillis's gambit has been successful so far. The Department of Homeland Security recently announced it will grant an extra 15,000 H-2B visas. That's 15,000 more jobs going to foreigners rather than America's ailing working class. We invited Senator Tillis on this program to discuss why he was so fervently committed to undermining the president's immigration agenda and the blue-collar voters who returned his party to power last fall. So far, he's declined, but of course, that invitation remains open, as always.